Hello, everyone.
Is Mom back?
Thanks, everyone, for coming. Nice to see such a good turnout. See that our residents still have a sense of community and justice. It's great to see everyone here. I want to thank our Claverack Town Board. The whole board is here helping. I think some of them were helping park cars. They've been really out in front on this issue in our town. We're really fortunate to have elected officials out there helping and supporting our town residents with this. I also wanted to recognize a few other elected officials who are here. We have some town board members from other towns. Marion Matheson is here from Milan. Ray Oberly came from the town of Clinton, where he's the supervisor. We have our town supervisor, Kitty Weigelt. Ron Knott is here from Stuyvesant, where he's the supervisor. Don Moore, president of the Hudson Common Council. Didi Barrett is here, assembly member for the 106th district. And Brian Howard, candidate for state senate, is also here. And we thank all of them for coming. So we're here today to introduce something that we think will bring some clarity that's been much needed to a proceeding that, even after a year of work, seems to confuse most of us. When we last met, we had 4 developers competing to build new transmission lines in the Hudson Valley. And there had recently been a speech by the governor in which he expressed support for transmission upgrade projects that were no wider and no higher than what we already have. Now, the proposals being considered mostly did not comply with that wish. And the PSC, the Public Service Commission of New York State, wasn't sure how to resolve that. So this past spring, they asked all parties to hold off doing anything and await further instruction. While we waited, the public filed comments with the PSC, almost exclusively indicating disapproval of the proposals. There are currently over 2,100 public comments about this proceeding on the PSC website. Another thing that we've done since we last met is that we further organized and strengthened our coalition, the Hudson Valley Smart Energy Coalition. On the steering committee for that group, we have from Columbia, Dutchess, and Albany counties, town board members, town supervisors, county government representatives, attorneys, former transmission engineers, historic preservation groups, environmental conservation groups, land conservancies, grassroots organizers, and citizen groups, who are all able to contribute knowledge and hard work to keep people aware of what's happening with the proposals. They help us engage with the PSC and with the relevant state agencies and work to provide tools for citizens to have their voices heard. Now, as our coalition discussed this issue, it started to become clear that the timetable the Public Service Commission had constructed would have them soliciting projects from developers before establishing a need for those projects. The need was implied, but was never quantified. So members of the HVSEC came into contact with a physics professor from Bard College named Dr. Gidon Eshel. Dr. Eshel was one of many whose property stood to be affected, and he asked his local government representatives what documentation there was of need for the project. When he learned that the answer was virtually none, he volunteered his time and expertise to conduct a study of need. The HVSEC, he proposed, would be free to use or not use the results as they saw fit. So using publicly available data and transparent methods, which you'll see today, Dr. Eshel dove into the research, analysis, and development of the study that you'll see in a few minutes. The issue at hand has a renewed sense of urgency now because the PSC is set to adopt a new set of guidelines recently recommended for this proceeding to move forward. And we're concerned because in the development of these guidelines, the thousands of comments from Hudson Valley residents, businesses, farmers, and elected officials seem to have been ignored. And most importantly, it appears the need is still assumed, but has not been quantified. For citizens to have their voices recognized in this proceeding, it's vital to have the question of need at least brought up and discussed before potentially $1 billion or more of ratepayer money is committed to the project. To that end, we're delighted to have Dr. Eshel provide the first true quantitative examination of the need as it relates to this project. And we at the Hudson Valley Smart Energy Coalition will engage with the PSC and others, and we hope that Dr. Eshel's work serves as the starting point for a full and honest discussion of need.
Thank you, everybody. If you don't know me, my name is Will Yandick. I'm the Deputy Supervisor of the Town of Livingston, a local farmer, and a founding member of the Hudson Valley Smart Energy Coalition. We're here today for a very simple reason. We're trying to get to the bottom of why the governor, as part of his Energy Highway program, has determined we need a large transmission project to run through the heart of the Hudson Valley. Now, to refresh your memory, the Public Service Commission, or PSC, an agency that has traditionally existed to evaluate transmission projects on behalf of consumers, has, for the very first time, solicited a transmission build-out with an assumed need, as Ian referenced. And only later will they actually begin to assess whether there's an actual need. And so if this violates your sense of common sense, you should know that you're not alone. So today, before we talk about undergrounding, before we talk about tower heights, before we talk about eminent domain or how our properties might be impacted, we have to settle a very simple question. Are these transmission lines needed? Now, the challenge is that the PSC defines need very broadly. They've said they want 1,000 megawatts of increased transmission capacity above what the current lines currently carry, but they've not revealed the models that justify that number. They say they want to increase the reliability of transmission lines, but even the New York Independent Systems Operators, a group you've probably never heard of that manages the grid and who's chartered to study these issues, have said that there is no reliability problem into the future. As a point of need, the PSC cites congestion on the current line, but fails to reveal that that congestion has decreased over the last 5 years and continues to do so. In the lingo of the PSC, they call this congestion the Mid-Hudson Central East constraint, a bottleneck, in other words, that potentially limits when power can move from upstate to downstate. But they don't reveal that this occurs only during literally a handful of July and August afternoons, and we can pinpoint it between 4 and 6 p.m. in the afternoon. New York City does not have an energy problem. What we have is a case of inefficient air conditioners in Brooklyn. So once it's clear that we are not talking about imminent rolling blackouts for New York City, let's be serious about how, from a public utility perspective, you might alleviate some of that peak summer demand. Now, energy-efficient air conditioners is the obvious answer, but there's another answer, and that's to develop power and transmission near where it's used. And you know what? That is exactly what is already happening. There are several power generation and transmission projects south of this central east constraint that the PSC references, and when Dr. Eshel in his report talks about this, he'll refer to them as projects in queue, meaning that state agencies have already given them the green light to build. These are projects in advanced stages of development. In fact, there are 10,000 megawatts of potential generation and transmission projects already in advanced stages of approval south of us. And if even a fraction of those projects break ground, then this AC proceeding would be rendered pointless. 10,000 megawatts that are potential. This is 1,000 megawatts for this project that we're talking about. You know, throughout this, we've said that this fight would be political, and it is. We know that the governor has more than hinted that as a matter of policy preference, he would like to close Indian Point nuclear facility. And what Dr. Eshel is going to show and tell us today, for the first time ever, quantitatively, that the governor can go ahead and close that plant. He can mothball all 2,000 megawatts of its potential generation, and we still would not have a transmission, congestion, or supply problem in this state. So by all the definitions of need by the PSC, let's look at them all. There are no reliability issues. Okay? There's no shortage of power generation or transmission being planned for downstate. There is decreasing congestion. And there is no practical barrier to closing Indian Point nuclear facility. So we're still left with this question, why do we need this project right now? A few things are key to remember as you listen to Gidon's presentation today. He's created a model that predicts supply and demand and congestion, and it relies heavily on the numbers and figures and data that the state uses. He's created an independent model that takes into account the supply that we have and we are likely to have into the future. He looks at demand, the amount of power that people and businesses will use downstate as it relates to their population growth, different climate change scenarios, because again, what we're really talking about is an air conditioning problem. The number of degrees that are above 90 degrees matter during the year. Dr. Gidon has modeled that and looked at that. He's looked at also deliberately conservative estimates of energy conservation when modeling demand and supply. Now, I want everyone in this room to know that Dr. Eshel's work has already been shared with other independent scientists. It has been thoroughly vetted, and it is strongly supported. Gidon offers this model to us and to state regulators, and he looks forward to having a debate about it. In fact, he's hungry to have that debate. And one thing should be clear from today's meeting. We have no reason to accept this project under any basis that is not quantified. Dr. Gidon Eshel is a broadly trained geophysicist with a PhD from Columbia. He completed a fellowship at Harvard Center for Earth and Planetary Physics, and in 1999 joined faculty at the University of Chicago. Since 2007, he teaches and researches at Barrett, focusing on environmental physics. Eshel has founded EnvironmentalCalculations.com, an applied research organization that offers quantitative environmental consulting. And in 2012, he published Spatiotemporal Data Analysis by Princeton University Press, which relates to the work that he's done and modeled for us that you'll see today. One of Eshel's 2014 papers is currently the second most downloaded paper among 75,000 papers in the century-plus history of the proceedings of the National Academy of Science. For those of us who don't understand academic publishing, that is a rock star statement, and that's a really big deal. So bear in mind today that Gidon is going to show some technical figures and technical graphs that it might, at first glance, may appear a bit too technical for our eyes. But remember, this is a technical presentation today because we're faced with a technical issue. Remember this. Remember this when the PSC uncritically and dutifully references energy highway policy documents that lack this level of technical detail when they ask us to support these transmission projects. Remember this when National Grid and the other utilities lean on the governor's policy documents that lack this level of technical detail, that force us to pay for their infrastructure. Remember this when non-governmental agencies pile up studies of transmission, but the guts of those reports are said to be either proprietary or hidden from the public. So remember that this presentation today may be complex, but it is the only validated and truly transparent assessment of need, and we challenge the PSC to match this standard. So the last part is really very simple, folks. We're here because we cannot pay for a $1 billion project that trammels the Hudson Valley simply because it is on Albany's wish list of vague policy goals. The stakes are too high. before we build a tremendously expensive mistake, we must address need. This is our right as residents, as citizens, and as ratepayers. Whether you are in this room or not, tell your neighbors. Their rate bills will go up to pay for a $1 billion mistake. So this is what we're here for today, and I welcome to you Dr. Gidon Eshel.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me in the back okay? Yeah? Okay, good. Thank you all for coming. It's an honor to address you and to share my work with you. And thank you very much for all the people who supported my work, whose names were up there for quite some time. Okay, what I want to do today, and don't think, Will made it sound like, you're delving into quantum mechanics 501. It's not going to be that. I watered it down as much as I possibly could. It is a technical piece of work, but the main validation is done in an entirely transparent way, but in the report rather than in person. Okay, so that is what I want to talk about today. You understand that, and as has already been stated multiple times, the basic prerequisite for any project, really, if you're going to change the kitchen cabinets or anything up to scouring the Hudson Valley up and down, you need to demonstrate that it is actually necessary. Okay, and let me preface this, okay, by giving you, if you are going to fall asleep sometime very soon, this is the upshot. Okay? There is absolutely no need, and I am very confident of this. Okay? So let me take you through the sort of an abbreviated version of what I went through this summer. Okay? The first thing I looked at is this. This is time over here, and this is megawatt hour per person per month, okay, in downstate New York. And this is what, it's a monthly data set, so it goes up and down depending on what kind of weather we have, etc. But the thing to notice is that it has been rising for quite some time, up until about 2004 or so, subsequent to which it has been steadily declining. Okay, so that begins to smell a bit fishy, and it gets fishier still. Okay, however, before we get to that, let me just kind of, as a courtesy to the PSC and the governor, let's just see what is it that can possibly support the argument. Okay, so the one thing that is very clear, it is getting warmer, and as Will said, the bottlenecks are realized in the summer, in the afternoon when it's hot, so temperatures matter. Okay, this is one of the many predictions of what temperatures in the country would look like. This shows in the colors the deviation of the mean over 2040 to 2059 from the mean between 1961 and 1990. Okay, so you can think about it as the degree of warming. Okay, and here is our area of interest right here, and you can see by appeal to the legend, there's about 2 to 2.5 degrees Celsius, or about 4.5 or so Fahrenheit, warmer than basically we're used to. Okay, so that's number one, and if really demand, peak load, is determined by temperature, well, there is ample reason to be concerned. In addition to which, the population that is concentrated in the downstate area is rising. Okay, so the solid symbols are observed past facts, and the empty hollow symbols are projections into the future. And the variable shown is downstate population in millions as a function of year clear through 2040. Okay, and it has been rising, and it has continued to modestly rise. Okay? So that too is a reasonable ground for saying, well, we need this. Put those two together, it has been getting warmer and the population has been rising, and you will find this entirely obvious. The downstate peak load in gigawatts right there, okay, has been rising, okay, and that's what it is. Don't worry about the different symbols. My first challenge was to find the entity that I'm eventually going to model. And that's a pretty murky entity, believe it or not, and it took its own model to build that, but the point of this is that there's no question that it has been historically rising to the tune of about 3 gigawatts per decade. Okay, 0.3 gigawatt per year. Okay? But, okay, so I shared with you some reasons why this plan may be necessary, right? Now let's start looking under the hood a little bit more carefully. This shows two estimates of the rate at which downstate peak loads are rising. So again, by comparing to this, it is basically the slope of this line at two distinct periods. One from 93 to roughly here, and the other is from about 2006 onwards. Okay? And this is the latter part of the record, of the slope, the degree to which the peak load is rising, and this is the earlier. Okay? And these are essentially uncertainty estimates that are painstakingly derived and are very statistically robust. And if you really want to know how I did that, you have to read the report, and my condolences. Okay? So this is what it looks like. Okay, between 93 and 2005, yes, there's no question. The peak loads have been rising, and we are very certain of this. This is the range within which the unknown but estimated rising rate falls within 99% confidence. Okay? So there's basically no question that they have been rising. But what about the recent past? No. We cannot reject the notion, for example, that actually they have been declining by 0.05 gigawatt per year. No, we cannot reject that notion. So the upshot, and you can see it right here, it's been rising, yes, but take a look at the latter part of the record. It is clearly, it's rising up to 205 and then flattening out. And that's what this quantifies very rigorously. Okay? So I gave you some reasons to worry that yes, we will need it, and then I undid myself showing you why we need not worry about it. Which is it? Okay? So we need to build a model, and that's what I do for a living. Okay? So the general approach of that model is initially analyze the reasons why recent years peak loads have been rising, then single out good predictors that explain that a posteriori behavior, and then that explain past observations, and then use the future value of good predictors to predict the future. Okay? That is what it is. And after sifting through kind of a dark forest for a while, this is the nature of this kind of work. There's nothing unusual about it. I singled out 3 important variables that determine what a population peak load would look like, and in any given population. Okay, and that is the total population. Okay, so that's shown right. The historic downstate peak loads are shown here, and this is the downstate population in millions. Okay, and the colors show you how time progresses. It's not explicitly shown, but all you see is peak load versus the population at any given time. But you can see that this was the distant past, like the early 90s, and this was the most recent past, let's say 2014 and a few years before that. Okay? So that is the first predictor, that's total population. And it makes sense, right? The more people you put in a given area, the higher the load is going to be. Then there is annual maximum temperature. So this is the maximum temperature of the day during which the daily temperature reached the maximum. Okay? So it is the single 1 hour temperature of the single highest 1 hour temperature of the year that was realized when the peaks were the peaks in downstate loads were realized. Okay, and here you see, yeah, the past was a little cooler and lower demand, and the recent times have been warmer and higher demand, peak load, but the relationship is not fantastic. It's okay. Okay. Then down here, the third predictor is the ratio of the population, the total population, that falls into two age groups. And the reason they're chosen is because people at various stages of life exert different demands on the grid. Okay? You can think about it, for example, the age group of 20 to 45 tend to have young kids at home, and young kids have, power needs. Okay, so that is intuitively appealing that their power needs will be distinct from the group whose ages fall within the 45 to 70 years old range. Okay, and that is what it looked like. Okay, I'll show you a graph of this momentarily, but you can kind of see that in the past, that ratio was very high, like around 1.6, 1.7. And as we go toward the present, it has been steadily declining. Okay? You can see that because it's kind of bluish here and reddish here. Okay? This, I'm not going to belabor this point because I promised all my my co-conspirators that I'm not going to belabor the validation of the model. A lot of work went into the validation, weeks and weeks of work, because that model, I really had that by week 3 maybe, and the whole thing took about 6 weeks for me to do. The point of this, however, is that those are very good predictors, although climate, which is this one in the middle, the maximum temperature, is the least robust of those. Okay? Now, here are the forecasts using that model, and I'm going to use this model in 2 distinct ways. First, I'm going to say this is the observed past. I already showed you. That's peak load right here. That's year over here. And this is a recent time history of peak loads in the downstate area. I'm going to first use my model in the following way. There are 21 years here. Let me pluck 2 at random out of those and use the model that only takes note of the 19 years that I retained to predict the 2 that are withheld. That is called cross-validation, and that's kind of like the gold standard of forecasting. Okay? So for example, you can say this, with the height of that whisker, tells you that when I excluded those 2 years and used the other ones to develop the model, and then used the developed model to retrospectively predict those, my error was only that small. That, if you didn't follow that exactly, that's quite all right. The upshot of this is this. I can predict the past very, very well, relative. Now, I'm sure you have Yogi Berra in your mind, etc. But let me tell you this. From a statistical standpoint, it truly makes no difference. If I'm withholding information from the model that occurred in the past and use it to predict the past than it is from using the model to predict the future. They're basically one and the same. So this, the reason they're one and the same is that the model knows nothing, never saw the years that are withheld, and then is used to predict what the peak load should have been. And how close is the prediction to the reality? That close. So, so again, even if you didn't follow every bit of the machinery, the upshot of those whiskers being as modest as they are is that that model is unusually powerful. Okay, and I have published tens of papers using this kind of machinery, and my book is also about that as well. And it is pretty rare, it's not unheard of, but it's pretty rare to have this kind of skill from that meager amount of information. Typically, one uses thousands of data points. And here, this is what we have, that's what we have to contend with. Okay? So another element of this graph is this. That is assets existing currently on the ground. Okay? So, and again, by the time you hit Christmas Eve of 2015, there is no more Indian Point. It's out of the question and is cold. Okay? And this is how much assets we have delivering energy to the downstate area. The reason it is rising is because there are many, many assets that have already planned and licensed and approved and the whole bit, and they have a particular completion year attached to them, just like they have a particular load that they're going to spew out in terms of electricity output. They also have a completion year, and that's when those gradually come online. Okay, so that is what we have. This is my prediction using my model of what we will need. Okay, so the first thing that you need to take home from this is this. Assets are always throughout the 2015 through 2040 well above even the bleakest of dire predictions as to what the peak load will be. And the shadings of gray, the blue is my best prediction given reasonable climate change, reasonable changes in population, and reasonable change in population composition. This is my best guess. However, reality has a funny way of not being quite this neat. Okay, fine. So what is the likelihood that it will fall in here? Well, that's shown by the darkest gray. That's the highest likelihood. Over here, the lightest shadings of gray, that's one shot out of 100. Okay? There's one shot out of 100 that in 2040, it will, the peak load will be as low as this or as high as this. Now, of course, around here, by the time we pass to 2020 or so, the issue is dead. Okay? There's just no need, end of story. Okay? But you might ask, what about this, huh? Okay, let me take advantage of Steve Jobs' bequest to us, and let me show you this. This is a means by which one can look very closely at what's going on in the graph. There it is. This is the uppermost end of the 1% chance that the peak load will be there, and this is the assets. Are they above the 1%? They are. That's it. Okay, so this is the upshot. I told you it already, and now I'm beefing it up a little bit, so to speak. There is absolutely no need. The fact that, let me take that off. The fact that, excuse me one second. The fact that the assets are always above the need basically obviate the notion that there is additional need that needs to be traversing the Hudson Valley. You can very well think about this as your salary versus your expenditures. As long as your salary is higher, even a little bit higher, here it's much higher, but here it's a little bit higher. But as long as your salary is higher than your expenditures, you're saving. That's where you need to be, okay? So the issue is truly made up, red herring, there is no need, okay? Now, this Will has already emphasized, but it is truly astonishing that the body in New York State in charge of pushing this proceeding forward is also the very one that said, no need, there is no need. It's very much like trying to walk forward with your right foot while trying to walk backwards with your left foot. That's what it is. Okay? Now, if you're interested to know why that is the way it is, there are three simple reasons why that is. The first is the total population, while it has been rising very rapidly in the recent past, it's been plateauing in the very recent past, and it's predicted to truly taper off as we move forward in time. And these are not my predictions. Those are predictions taken from the Cornell Center on Applied Demographics. Okay, it's a reputed source for predictions of future populations. Okay, so sharp rise in total population in the recent past, much slower to none in the upcoming future. That's one of the explanations why the peak load rise is coming to an end. The other is that the composition of the population has been steadily changing. So what you see here, okay, this again is time. But what you see here is the ratio of the fraction of the population falling into the 20 to 45 year old to the fraction falling into the 45 to 70 year old range. And this was, like we saw before, something like 1.68 or so in 93 or so. And it's been very sharply declining, but it is expected, we are basically at an inflection point on this curve, and from this point on, it is no longer going to continue to drop, and if anything, it is going to gingerly rise. Okay? And again, because so the upshot of this is summarized here. Young population growth outpaces significantly the middle-aged population growth. Excuse me, the other way around. The middle-aged population growth is much faster than the youngsters. That trend basically, the ratio of those two age groups basically flattens out from around now onward. Okay? And because there is a very distinct power demand of these two groups, that is the second explanation. The third, there's no graphic for it, but it's just shown right here, and that you've already seen with the climate. The peak loads exhibited a pretty weak dependence on climate. Because think about it, if you have an AC, does it really matter if it's 90 or 100? You're going to crank up the AC if it's 90. So if it's 100, oh well, it's still on, and that's what you got. Okay, so that's why the dependence is weak. And even though, unfortunately, climate is projected to, or maximum temperatures are projected to rise very significantly, this is in the model. The model takes note of that, and it's actually the rate at which the maximum temperatures are rising in my model is a little higher than the best prediction, just to be conservative. Okay. Okay. So again, not to beat a dead horse, but here it is. So is the project necessary? Emphatically no. It is unnecessary. And this is why. What we have on all hands on deck, they will meet that demand and exceed it. Okay? Now, I want to conclude with a few attributes of this plan that are peddled in the media, but that need to be examined very closely. The first is, it's a green plan. It is an environmental panacea that is going to bring all that untapped wind energy from upstate New York into where it is needed in the downstate. Well, let's look a little bit more carefully. New York State is basically New York City. There's 8.2 million people in New York City, and the next largest city is 260,000. Okay? This is where the need is, end of story. Okay, where is the wind? This is a map of where wind resources are available. And there are two places where they're available. Around the island, around Long Island, and up in the Great Lakes. Now, the Great Lakes are not that great. Well, they're great for many reasons, but they're not great for putting windmills all the way in the Canadian border just to bring them over here. You will heat a lot of the atmosphere in the interim, and that is an enormous waste. It is silly. Instead, isn't it nice that the hand we got is all aces? Here it is. We have the population right here, and this is where the wind is most powerful. Now, if you're really serious about wind, okay, you don't go to the middle of nowhere, okay, in terms of wind. I'm not passing any judgment on any other thing, but simply in terms of wind. You do not go into the middle of nowhere. You go to where the wind is. Right? If you want to rob a bank, you go to a bank. Okay? And this is where the assets are. Take a look at this. Cape Wind is already well on its way, as is the Block Island plan. The resources of Long Island are world class. World class. Okay? And this little humble legend here says that within 100 and 200 miles offshore around the US, we have 15 times the national energy annual demand dissipated as wind rubs against ocean. Of that, easily 3 times the national demand is tappable. So just to translate this to English, if you were to put wind mills along, we're talking way the hell out there. Nobody will see that except seafarers, okay? But if you do that, you can exceed 3-fold the actual energy demand of the country. So if you're serious about wind, you do not go to the hills north of Albany. You go to where the wind is. Okay? Now, it is not consistent with your and my best interest. Okay, this goes as follows. Okay, electricity throughout its short history must have been, should have always been centralized. You should have had a power plant and somebody with deep enough pockets running the wires between here and there. That is not something that any Joe or Jane off the street can pull off. Okay, but now with solar being what it is, and many other alternative sources of power being what they are, as lucrative as they are, this is the first time that the energy market can be distributed and egalitarian. Now, to be clear, we will need, for the foreseeable future, we will need a grid. The question is how bulked up, okay? But this novelty, this potential, giving us the choice. What do we want? Do we want to buy power from here or from here? Do we want it from coal? Do we want it from natural gas? Whatever, right? The plan stifles this novelty because it says basically, oh, you people don't know enough. We will tell you what is best for you. And what is best for you is National Grid and Central Hudson and on, the big conglomerates, okay? So what is more American, more authentic? Is it a handful of mega corporations or hundreds of mutually competing small businesses that offer new jobs and that reduce the rates? What is more, what should we think of as more sought after, more desirable? Another thing, there is a radio personality around the Hudson Valley who is on record saying, oh, that's just NIMBY, not in my backyard. Okay, let's address this for a minute. NIMBY is about recognizing the need, but wanting somebody else to shoulder the burden. I remember to this day, you know, when I'm Israeli, right? So I was in the military for a number of years. And I remember my father told me before I went to the military, he said, don't ever make eye contact with your sergeant, because if you do, he'll ask you to do the next chore that has to come. Okay? So, and that's what you do. You just kind of look like that, and you're really interested in the piece of land right under your feet. Okay? So, this is not it. We are not recognizing the need and wanting somebody else to shoulder the burden. We are simply rejecting the notion that there is any need. So rejecting this plan is common sense. It's not selfishness. The last element that I want to leave you with is the issue of safety. Okay? Okay, so this is the kind of distributed network that I described to you kind of looks like that. This is what they call a synthetic network, kind of made up on a computer. This is what the grid kind of looked like now, okay? With some key nodes to which many, many things are connected. But, you know, when you think about it, if my house burns to a crisp, would you care? Well, you might, but not in terms of your power. That would not have any impact on that. Okay, so my house will be one of those green nodes that are connected to one or two other nodes, and that's it. Okay, but then if a substation feeding a whole county burns to a crisp, now there will be many people that will take note of that. Okay? And the question is, these two models, that's the kind of model we are able to achieve with distributed generation that is currently for the first time technically feasible. And this is the historical model that the PSC is trying to foist on this area. And let's ask this. There are two ways that this can malfunction, these networks can malfunction. One is just a malfunction. You know, this can break down or that can break down. That happens randomly over the network. But if you're a terrorist, then you wouldn't want to do that. You wouldn't waste your time on something that's connected to one other thing. You will go to the big guy, right? You will go to one of the red nodes and you will take them out. What this is quantifying is how far do you have to reach up the network to get to any active source of power if the node to which you're directly connected goes out. And so the horizontal axis shows you the fraction of the network that malfunctions. So think about it this way. If you go here and take 1, 2, 3 at random, what does it look like? Okay? And this over here is, like I said, how far up you have to go, through how many steps do you have to go until you get to a live wire. Okay? And the answer is this. There are two types of failures, right? One is simply a failure that can happen anywhere. The other is attack, which goes after the red nodes. Okay? And the point of this line is that those networks, like the one the historical model looks like, okay, those networks are very easy to bring up to their knees, as you see by the rapid rise of the empty red circles. Okay? So that can be said to be a measure of the resilience to attack. And the or the opposite of resilience, okay, resilience is down and the opposite of resilience is up. And the heterogeneous network is the antithesis of resilience. Okay? So remember again, well, you might say, well, it may be the antithesis of resilience, but we've been living with it since Edison's times. Yes, but now we have a choice. We didn't have a choice in the past. There was also something called 9/11 that didn't happen continuously throughout the history of the grid. Okay, so is the proposed plan safe? No, emphatically no, again. Okay, it is just about the least safe configuration possible. And finally, in summary of the whole thing, okay, the proposed plan is unnecessary. Sorry about that. The proposed plan is definitely unnecessary. It is anti-competitive. It's not only that you will need to pay in your rate the capital cost for building those towers. It is also that there will be less incentive on the people that feed you electricity to lower their rates. And it reduces resilience at a time where we need to enhance resilience. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, I think we'll do a brief question and answer period. We're going to try to keep it really to maybe 5 minutes or so, and then as you go out, there are a few things that we'd like to point out to you that can be done to help the effort here, and I'll just list those briefly. We have a petition that we've started. You're able to sign it in person in the back of the room. Sorry, I'm getting a signal. Yeah, we have a petition. We started this petition a couple of months ago. It's already over 5,000 signatures. If you have not signed it, we'd love to add your name to it, asking the governor to really examine the need and respect the integrity of the Hudson Valley. We have some postcards that are pre-addressed to the governor and to the PSC. All you have to do is put your name and address on them and drop them in the mail, and that will send the message loud and clear to those entities as well. You can sign up to join the Hudson Valley Smart Energy Coalition, be a member, and receive updates. And there are also lots of informational handouts that we'd love for you to take. So Will's going to join me, and we'd like to have, we have a transmission expert, Dan Duffy, who will also come up and can probably answer every question better than either of us could. But Dan, if you could join us now, we'll take a couple of questions.
That is one tough act to follow.
This is not a technical question. I was just wondering, thank you so much for that comprehensive analysis. It was absolutely fascinating. And I'm convinced that there is no need for additional power, especially downstate. I'm just interested to know what the thinking is in terms of the motivation on the part of the PSC to push for this proposal.
Let me answer that. I don't think the PSC per se is pushing for it. It looks like that. But the governor in 2012 created something called the Energy Highway. And I think this was sort of a political deal to throw a bone to the utilities and to the environmentalists. The utilities get to make investment. That's the only way they make money, is through investment. They don't make money on the labor. They don't make money on the fuel that they need. So the only way they make money is to put assets in the ground. Okay, utilities, you get to build this 1,000 megawatt transmission project. Environmentalists, here's the bone to you. You get to get the wind power to coming down from upstate. There's only one little problem, okay? The $1.3 million project that we're talking about here is going to cost, excuse me, $1.3 billion, thank you, Ray. The $1.3 billion is going to cost you guys $260 million a year to support it. The congestion in New York City is less than that today, or at least as of 2012, and we believe it's still going down. So why would anyone spend more money to solve a problem that costs less? It's just lunacy. And I think that's part of the origin. But once the process got started, the developers came in eager to get their hands on that big investment, be allowed to produce this investment, and have you guys pay for it. And once they came in, now all of a sudden, the public service law takes over, and they have rights under Article 7. So we've been looking real hard to give the governor and the PSC an off-ramp on the energy highway.
Thank you very much for the presentation. The one thing, when I looked at this, I thought to myself, if I'm the PSC, I'm going to say, but look at the population that's continuing to grow. And I know you've done all this quantitative work and have disproved it, but to me, it's still, it's out there as we have more population, we're going to need more power and so on, and how do we fight that? How do we go against that?
We answer it in the following way. We answer it two ways, really. First, yes, it used to rise fast. No, it will not rise very fast in the future. Number two is this. With that rise, even very low probability rapid rise, okay, that's the maximum load that we will have. That's in the model, and this requires numerous ducks to align themselves in a row for climate change to be worse, or not worse, but toward the high end, for population to be toward the high end, and for the population age distribution to remain more or less the same as it has been. With those three ducks in a row, it is still there. That's what we have. This is how much of a surplus we have. That's how you answer it.
Let me just add to that to show how conservative Gidon Eshel's work is. The supply that you're looking at is actually half of what is in the queue downstate. So we made an assumption, or Dr. Eshel made an assumption, that says only 50% is going to show up. There's 10,000 megawatts in this queue, but only half is going to show up. And that's how much extra, if only half of the project come to, as my Indian friend said, fruition. So there you have it as a super conservative forecast of the supply and the demand.
Dr. Eshel, thank you so much for making such a complex subject seem so digestible and coherent to all of us. It was remarkable. Thank you so much. My question to Ian and Will and the rest of us is, how do we get this information? What's the next step to get this information to policymakers and to those who can incorporate this research and this clear lack of need in their future planning?
I think the obvious answer is you've got to get to our governor. His name is on this plan. He has made a political calculation that his green image will be polished by two things: that wind energy we're talking about and closing Indian Point. He got those compass points from environmental leaders in the community that from decades ago. He's running on that. He needs to know that those two goals are negated by destroying a whole region's economy in the Hudson Valley. We monetize this landscape. My business, a farmer, my family's been farmers for 4 generations here. What's changed here in the Hudson Valley in the last decade or two is tourism, real estate, a food economy, economies that monetize our historic resources, second home markets. All of these things are threatened by this transmission line that negate whatever good that you can get from wind and Indian Point. Well, we've always suspected this. The new part of the story is what Dr. Gidon Eshel gave us. He has shown us quantitatively that you don't have to choose. close Indian Point. Shutter it down. We don't need it. And he's also shown quantitatively that the wind resources that look great in a white paper to polish a politician's green image aren't there upstate. So who needs to know this? The governor. When the governor gets criticism, his whole second floor goes haywire into panic mode, and they listen. They're listening to us here. They're paying attention to you being here. We wouldn't have gotten this far without you paying attention and doing what you're doing. So let the PSC know, but also let the governor know, because he's the ultimate decision maker here.
Make a comment about how in the late of last year that the proposals included eminent domain as one of their big aspects. Then we did a big petition drive. We had like 3,000 signatures. Took them to Albany, the same group of people that are doing it now. And then we got that eminent domain removed, basically, from the proposals. It's sort of hidden there, but it's not part of the overall strategy. So we did make an impact earlier. I think we can do the same thing here.
That's a really good point. I think you pretty much said it all. I think what we're talking about is the messaging from the utilities and the developers. They were initially saying, yeah, there's eminent domain in there. That's the way we do it. And after a big public outcry, they came back with a message that was, oh yeah, we've totally removed it. It's not even a chance anymore. It's still as in there as it ever was, but we at least forced them to recognize the sort of will of the public. Yeah.
To add to the comment that was made here, I think that to whom does the governor listen? And we were just sitting here saying, I think two outlets should be approached because this is a significant story. One is the New York Times and the other is the Wall Street Journal. And before the election, because this seems like a very big story that's not just Columbia County. It really goes to the heart of what is needed and how the PSC makes decisions. And that's a bigger story than just us.
That's an excellent point. We have had one story published in the New York Times already about this, about a couple of months ago. It was in the home section. It was kind of about an issue upstate. And we are engaged with their editorial board currently trying to move the ball forward on another story.
It should be this. I mean, I'm sorry, it really should be this.
Yeah, they will certainly be made aware of this.
All right. Somebody said that the governor did this as a sop to the utilities and to the environmental lobby. I mean, I've been practicing law in New York for 40 years, and I know better than to think that you're going to roll back the utilities on something like this. But I'm wondering what is being done to undercut this for the environmentalists? I mean, can this kind of thing be used to get them to retrench and approach the government that looks at this thing as an anti-green initiative? Or is it, I would imagine they can't be as foregone a conclusion as the utility lobby.
Yeah, let me take a shot at that. Yeah, I think the way to approach the environmental group is to demonstrate as the longer you have to transmit power, the less efficient is the result. So when you have to put power over 156 miles, you're losing a lot of that in the process. So that is inherently inefficient. It means that you have to burn more fuel to get the equivalent amount of power. So the concept is let's put everything closer to the need and reduce that negative environmental impact.
That's, my question is, I mean, I'm sold on that. I think it's a very obvious proposition. My question is, how do you take that as a practical matter and drive it up the butts of the environmental lobby that also help deliver this to us?
Well, we don't want to drive anything up anyone's butt, but I think that, you know, intelligent discourse with the environment. Look, in the Hudson Valley Smart Energy Coalition, we have some environmental organizations. We have Scenic Hudson, okay? We have Alana. We have the Omega Institute. We have people that are extremely sensitive to the aesthetics of the environment and the impact on the environment. So I don't think we have a really hard sell for the environmental community, because all they got to do is look at one of those pictures in the back, look at the size of those transmission lines, and you have to be someone who's a complete manic industrialist to love those pictures. So I think we're there with the environmental community, frankly.
Can I add to that? I'm on the board of Scenic Hudson, and we're extremely adamant with the government about being against this effort entirely. So we're very vocal.
The only thing I wanted to add, yes, Scenic Hudson is a member of the Hudson Valley Smart Energy Coalition, has been a huge leader on this topic. But if you poll New Yorkers about the issues that matter most to them, economy is here, and environment is here. It's an important constituency, but a bigger constituency here is any ratepayer in the state of New York. We have to pay for this. This is a basic story of government waste. Why spend $1.3 billion for a product we don't need, who benefits no one other than the shareholders of a utility? That's a powerful arrow. That's the real message.
We'll do maybe one more.
It hasn't been mentioned, but it's what worries me most are the health concerns from this increased force field of electricity that will come from these big towers. And I don't know if it's been proved or not, but I've read a lot about it being very detrimental to people's health. Is that a factor? Is it real, or is it just hysteria?
Yeah.
The cancer rates around big electrical installations are much higher than elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I'll tell you this. As you heard, I have a PhD in physics, and I bought a house that is 1,000 feet from one of the major power lines. Before I did that, I studied the topic, not with original research, because I'm not a medical professional, but I can read the statistics very well, and I can read medical journals, and I concluded in the end that there is no persuasive demonstration of adverse effects is out there.
Can I use my electric blanket again?
I didn't do any reading about that.
Can we give a round of applause for Dr. Gidon Eshel? And again, there are those postcards, things that you can do, things you can sign up for if you want to.